I'm here in Seville for the international launch of the Porsche Taycan and Taycan Turbo GT. And sadly, Mark will not be joining us for this video as he was stopped by Spanish border authorities for trying to bring in several thousand pounds of Arby's meat. However, we will be speaking to two separate Porsche engineers, both named Christian. Now, before we talk to them, what do you need to know about the Porsche Taycan? Well, this is the second generation, affectionately named J1.2. They've sold nearly 150,000 Taycans since launch, and the vehicle can be had as either a wagon or as a sedan. And there are a lot of different trim levels. You can get this as a rear-wheel drive base model, you can get it as a Turbo, Turbo S, 4S, 4, and of course, the vehicle that we are in, which is brand new for this generation. It is called the Taycan Turbo GT, and it comes in at an eye-watering $230,000 before any options, which is a lot of money. However, you do get a lot of power. This thing makes over 1,000 horsepower in regular mode, and when you put this into track attack, it makes slightly under 1,100. From a options perspective, just like every Porsche, everything is optional, but you can fully customize this car to your heart's content. And for this generation, they've improved on the main complaints we had with the original one, which is range. Now, depending on trim level, you can get past 300 miles of usable range, which is exactly what this car needed. But with enough of that said, let's go talk to Christian about chassis development. I'm here in Spain at the launch of the new Taycan and Taycan Turbo GT. I'm with this gentleman, Christian. Christian, please introduce yourself to the camera.
Hey, I'm Christian Wolfsried. I'm the manager of the drive system of the Taycan. And yeah, let's talk about the fun things of the car.
So your vehicle dynamics, you basically deal with what you interact with, how the car feels behind the wheel, and you've done all the Taycans, from regular Taycan, like the base, Turbo S, and of course the Taycan Turbo GT behind us, correct?
Correct, yeah. I started back in 2016 with the first Taycan as a driving dynamic engineer. Yeah, and now we are in the second generation.
Christian and I are going to be talking about suspension systems. Obviously, it's now the next evolution. You've gone away from 400 volt, now it's only 800 volt. You got rid of the 48 volt system. Now
yes.
Now you can't get 48 volt sway bars, but there are some massive improvements in other departments to compensate for that. So now it's standard. You get air ride across the board, correct?
Correct, yeah. Also the base Taycan model comes with a adaptive system. So we have a 2-chamber air suspension. We have a 2-valve damper already in the base Taycan, so which is a big improvement.
And then now you have what you guys call active, fully active suspension as well?
Yeah, we have Active Ride, Porsche Active Ride, which is basically an active system where we remove the sway bars and we have a pump for every wheel to individually control every single wheel of the car.
And that system, from my understanding, I know you have all your marketing terms for it, but it basically negates pitch and dive under braking and acceleration for normal comfort modes. You have helicopter mode or aircraft mode where it gets as light as possible over all the bumps so you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
How are you telling it to basically do that? How do you get, is there an algorithm? Is it reactive? Is it predictive? What are you doing?
Well, it's a reactive system, and the main thing is we have a 2-valve damper, an active damper, and we can put active force on the damper to individually control every single wheel of the car. So what we can do is we control the driving situation at every moment, and depending on the situation, we can put more or less force on every single wheel with a super fast and super strong system, which allows us in every driving condition to readjust the situation and how the car behaves, basically.
So when you turn, I guess from an example perspective, say I'm on a mountain road and I'm turning left into a corner at high speeds, how are you getting it to negate that body roll?
Well, on a mountain road, the car moves to the outside, so the inner wheels get lighter. And what we do basically is that we try to put force on the inner wheels to still hold them as maximum as possible to the ground, to have on every single wheel the maximum force to the ground. So the performance basically gets better because we just have more grip on the 4 wheels individually. And yeah, this is the same for braking. The rear gets loose a little bit, and we try to compensate that with our system. We can control every single wheel and get the best possible performance out of every driving situation. Yeah, and this is what we put so much effort in, that this still feels like real, and you get a feedback and the response of the car, and even though there are no sway bars anymore, the car behaves like you are used to, and you get like a good feeling for it.
And you are combining your active shocks with torque vectoring by brake as well, and a mechanical differential when optioned. How are these systems recalibrated for Taycan Turbo GT, which is the most powerful Porsche currently made, and your track variant for the Taycan?
Yeah, so basically it comes with the same systems like a Turbo S, but we adapted all of those systems, especially for the Taycan GT and the GT with Weissach package. And put much effort in how the car drives on track conditions. So yeah, we basically adjusted all the systems on the Nürburgring and tried to be there as quick as possible.
So you're physically the same hardware, but you've recalibrated to have essentially higher spring rates front and rear and deal with the extra grip from the tires?
Yeah, exactly. We have special tires on the car. You can get Trofeo RS if you want to, and our setup was basically done for the best and fastest track and setup conditions for the Nürburgring.
Character-wise, you have two different packages for this car. You have the 4-door with 4 seats, and then you have the Weissach, which is not available in the US, which has the carbon buckets and a back seat delete. How do those two cars drive differently? I know there's a big difference in aerodynamics.
Yeah, exactly. We put out the maximum weight of the car in the Weissach package, which helps us to put a little bit more downforce on the rear axle. So in total we have 230 kilograms of downforce, which is most of it basically on the rear, some of it on the front also. And this helps us to keep the car, even in high-speed corners, stable in the rear axle. And it's the most, let's say, trustful setup we could offer Lars, who is driving faster with a stable car, even at high-speed corners, because he just feels more comfortable.
So the Weissach package, you get a little bit more stability in the back end, and then without it, it's a little bit looser from the rear.
Let's not call it loose, but just a little bit more agile and
wanting to rotate.
Yeah, maybe not so fast anymore, but I mean it's still safe and still stable. But yeah, it just moves a little bit more. And with the Weissach package, it gave Lars the confidence, even at the super high-speed corners, to have a stable car.
Like a low 7-minute lap around the Nürburgring, which is hilarious to think about in a 5,000-pound car.
It is.
I want to talk a little bit more about the dynamics of this thing. So you have a lot of systems talking to one another. You have a mechanical clutch-based stiff in the back. You have your torque vectoring by brake, which is primarily grabbing the inside wheel of the back in corner. And you have all the systems talking to one another. And you have the all-wheel drive setup between the two motors, front and rear. So when you're driving, can you send up to 100% of the power to the front? Or how is that balance being set up with the electric motors?
Well, basically it would be possible, but of course you have one engine in the rear, one in the front. So if you just go for the front, you don't have the maximum system power anymore. Same for 100% rear. So this is what we basically try to figure out, the best sweet spot in terms of performance and handling feel, that we get the maximum power out of the car. But you're right, all of our systems are communicating together, and we always try to find the sweet spot of every system for that specific driving situation.
And you also have rear steer, which I just forgot about that as well. You have the rear steer module getting this to turn in better. And
yeah, so we have like one ECU, which is controlling the driving situation and the surface and everything, and sends the information to all our chassis systems. And the systems themselves find the sweet spot for the exact driving situation you are driving in.
Is it primarily like a rear biased feeling power distribution for the car?
It definitely is rear biased. I mean, we have so much system power, and we try to be as much agile as possible, but of course we need the front axle and the all-wheel drive to get the maximum performance and power out of the system. Yeah, exactly.
So with that, I really, really appreciate your time, Christian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
Bring it.
Setting off in the Taycan Turbo GT at a track I've never been to before, behind a development driver from Porsche, Christian, who, per usual, is like 80 times the driver that I am. This car, as we already talked about, makes a little over 1,000 horsepower normally. In attack mode, you're just under 1,100. It's 5,000 pounds, and this is a very, very tight course. And it just rained. So this is gonna be an interesting drive. I've left this in Sport Plus. All of the driving aids are on, as I do not want to crash this $230,000 car in Spain. That would not go well. What do you need to know about this thing? Well, very obviously, it is alarmingly fast. And it's a weird mix. The only car I can really relate this to driving is the Lucid Sapphire. And that car is both more and less digital than this vehicle. So this does not have a traditional brake pedal. It is brake-by-wire. It has incredibly active suspension. That car is on steel springs, where this is on air all the way around. But unlike that car, it has a single motor in the rear, but it puts its power down through a traditional clutch pack, where the Lucid Sapphire uses two motors, brakes, and motor control to effectively stimulate the limited slip differential, where this has a mechanical one. So the driving experience of this in the rear feels more like a traditional Porsche, where it locks up in the back. It helps basically assist with the power. We're about to do launch control here in a second before we get done with the slalom. So here you can see the roll control of the car is very impressive, helping maximize the contact patch of the tires, and then you have rear steer for turn-in. Launch control. Christian's about to do this. After you, sir. This does 0 to 60 in just over 2 seconds, and let me tell you, that never gets old. Jesus. 60. 120. So in attack mode, which I will try to use in all the straights as my brain can comprehend it. 1 second. Man. Brakes, big carbon ceramics. Honestly, if I do have a complaint with this car, as we talk about in all vehicles with brake-by-wire, it does a very good job stopping you, but there's some initial vagueness. And as the brakes get more and more heat in the actual calipers themselves, the brake consistency and the brake feel does change and becomes more and more vague, which is not something I particularly like in a over 1,000 horsepower car at a track I don't know that well, behind a pro driver. Jesus. Oof. The thing I will bring up is when you're off throttle, because this being an EV, it does have regen. So it puts the weight back on the front end of the vehicle, which does help with some, corner turn-in. You have the rear steer as well, which really gets this thing in and out of corners, though it does feel like it's 5,000 pounds. You can hear it in these poor tires as well. The more we push, the greasier the front gets, the more it kind of wants to communicate that in the sound of tortured tires. Oof, Jesus. The steering, though, is typical Porsche, incredibly direct. While there isn't what I would consider a ton of feel, you know what the front end is doing at all times. And bring it around. Man, forgive me as I'm trying to both talk and figure out what the hell is happening behind the wheel of this thing. I mean, other than that, it's incredibly quick. The turn-in is great. This is exactly sort of what you're expecting out of a Porsche EV track car. Can't really defeat the physics of the vehicle, meaning it's still very heavy, but between all the electromechanical systems, the rear diff being a physical rear diff, and just all the Porsche-ness of this second generation Taycan, It is a impressive vehicle. I don't know how many people are actually going to be tracking their EV, but if you're one of the few, I think given sort of the world we're in, it is a very impressive car. I would like to drive this back to back on a track I know when it's not greasy with the Lucid Air Sapphire to see what the exact differences are, but I do think the front to rear chassis balance in some ways is more traditional in the way I think about cars and having that normal mechanical limited slip in the back, but there is a layer of vagueness to some of the inputs that the Lucid I do think does better, particularly braking. Again, brake-by-wire is always going to be a system that I feel there is a little bit of vagueness regardless of what the manufacturers say and the pros inherent with the car. Again, you don't have a physical connection to the brake pedal. It is an e-pedal. Yes, there's a physical redundancy at the end where you're pushing a plunger in, but the initial feedback loop is digital. So with that, let's wrap up this video and head into the final thoughts before I kill myself. Final thoughts on the 2025 Porsche Taycan and Taycan Turbo GT. Huge thanks to our Porsche reps, Luke, Frank, and Calvin, who continue to be some of the very best in the business, and of course, both of the Porsche engineers we interviewed, both named Christian. Now let's start with the regular Porsche Taycan. When I say regular, I mean everything from the base model rear-wheel drive all the way up to the Taycan Turbo S. With the latest improvements to J1.2, specifically in the efficiency department of the electric motors and battery pack, this is now a usable car. With its bigger pack, if you pick the bigger range of 105 kilowatt hours, the greater charging speeds, the overall efficiency of the motor improvements, this is now a very usable car. Assuming you are driving it like a regular person, you have a real-world range of the mid 300 mile mark. Some of the other outlets are getting like 366 real-world miles. Exactly what the Taycan needed to be a usable car, at least in the Midwest where we live. Now, the other giant pro of this car is their new suspension system known as Active Ride. It's $7,500. Yes, that is a lot of money, assuming you have a trim that you can option it on. It is, however, transformative. It is one of the most impressive optional suspension packages I've ever felt. It really makes us feel like a luxury vehicle. Combine that with a very solid cabin, far more solid feeling than the BMWs and Lucids of the world. The fact that you can fully customize this car, it feels like an expensive luxury good. The con of this car, and honestly, there are two of them. One, space. It's not that big. The Lucid is a much more usable car. The 5 Series is a little bit more usable. And the other con is price. These things are now astronomically expensive. We have plenty of friends or viewers of this channel who can afford expensive vehicles. And they tell me all the time, the recent price increases of Porsche, and we're talking 10, 15 grand every year, they're starting to potentially lose some of their customers. It's not that they can't afford these cars anymore, it's that they don't see the value of spending $150,000 for a fully loaded Taycan 4S, and I see their point. Now let's talk about the Taycan Turbo GT, the ultra niche product that is. You are the one of like 5 people on the planet who want to drive a track-focused Taycan, and you want to be able to delete the rear seats and do a low 7-minute Nürburgring time. This is a vehicle for you. It is very impressive, it is very expensive, and it is ultra fast. Quite simply, I will compare this to the Lucid Air Sapphire video that many of you have watched. The chassis tuning on as a road car is softer. Active Ride does a really, really good job. In lower speed sections of the track, with the mechanical differential and the rear steer and the Active Ride, it gets in and out of corners better. However, in mid-speed corners and high-speed corners, the Lucid, at least to my feel, does a better job due to the dual motors in the back. The Lucid also does not have brake-by-wire. The biggest issue with the Taycan Turbo GT is under braking, and I'm not the only journalist to bring this up, there's a giant sense of vagueness, particularly as you put heat in the system, and the pedal distances need to increase because it's a brake-by-wire setup, as in the brake pedal's a load cell, you don't have the most confidence in braking. And when you're dealing with a over 1,000 horsepower, 5,000 pound car, that does lead to some concerns. There is some more naturalness though versus the Lucid because you do have a mechanical diff. Thanks for watching, and we're going to end this video off with a moment of bliss. Lars Kern going absolutely flat out in this car.
even worse. I could at least see 50% of the way.
See, if we're gonna turn to the right, then I can see. No, that's great. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I feel like mostly it's just like watching the line and like keep track of the differences.